Well, good day. I'm Warren Pearce. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Mine and Exploration Companies. I'm here at Energy Mines and Money Brisbane 2019, and I'm here with Ben Hurd from Frazer-Nash Consultancy, who's here today to present about the zero carbon mine of the future around 2035, I think.
That's right.
What are you going to be telling delegates this week?
Well, I think it's obvious here at this conference, at every resources conference I come to, that sustainability is constantly front of mind. And energy is obviously an essential part of running a mining operation in Australia. And so there are challenges that are now being brought to bear. I think it's very interesting with what we're seeing happening in Western Australia, with the EPA asking for carbon neutrality of development projects in the state. That sends a real signal about what might be required in future. And there's a huge energy transition underway in Australia as it is. We're already seeing the application of hybrid energy solutions in off-grid mining, particularly with solar, complementing diesel, and finding more and more circumstances where that is able to deliver. But there's real challenges in mining, particularly larger mining operations, with the reliability, the quantity and the quality of power that's required. So I'm going to be talking in particular about what's happening in the nuclear space. So new technology developments in smaller, hotter reactors that could be really suited for particular mining regions, or even possibly down to being something small enough for a single mine.
And that sort of technology development is happening in the United States now?
Yeah, so North America is very important in that space, but we're seeing some developments all over the world. So Argentina developing a 25 megawatt reactor. That's a really interesting size. And interesting to note, Argentina actually built the Opal reactor in Sydney. So and it's one of the world's most successful research reactors. But leading companies like NuScale out of North America, Terrestrial Energy out of Canada, they are currently going through the licensing process with those regulators to get those designs licensed so that they can then move to the point where they're selling to customers and putting it on board. So it's a very interesting time right now.
So we're currently, I guess, in a transition space now. You're starting to see a wider range of renewable technologies come into the mix, particularly in remote operations and in the resources sector. How do you think that transition's going?
Well, it's going about as disruptively as I think we would expect it to go. Sometimes it's very successful. I mean, you can find a lot of isolated projects where someone's had extremely great success, maybe in displacing a large quantity of diesel from their operations. Or, for example, when we look at things like remote deployable bases for defence, where they're investigating more hybrid energy options, this is very, very interesting. On the grid, it's proving really challenging. I mean, we're getting a mix of outcomes. We're getting somewhat of a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions on the grid. That's a goal we wanted. But we're losing system reliability, we're losing frequency control and stability, and wholesale prices, unfortunately, have been sort of creeping on the up. So we're in a very messy period of transition right now. And so what I think is really interesting is to look out at that sort of, particularly on the resources kind of timeframes, about mining in about 2035. If there was a lot of pressure on clean, reliable energy, how could we actually achieve that? And so I think it's going to be very important that we open ourselves up to all of the technology options to get that balance and blend right. I don't think we're there yet. I think we've got some questions we need to answer.
That's really interesting. So I think I look at some of our member companies, and certainly the renewables are creeping in a much bigger way, particularly remote operations. One of the real challenges we've found is actually finding a way to make that hybrid arrangement work, whether it be with solar panels and batteries or with wind power, how you move from diesel back to, and how you're able to do that quickly when there's a drop in, there might be sunshine or wind, and you need to move on to the diesel generation. It's been quite challenging. Obviously, there's a lot of cost that goes in making those investments. How are companies finding ways to get that money committed?
They really need to do the sums on what's our base case here, and they need to understand their requirements very carefully. What do we actually need out of our power system? In these sorts of circumstances, you're right, they can't sacrifice that operational reliability. That can't be traded off. It's got to be controlled through the controls and constraints, and so they've got to do the hard numbers on what are our energy options, what are our risks, and find some solutions. It's good to see more and more of those solutions creeping in. I think what's interesting about a potential nuclear option for the future is that reliability question is answered prima facie. They run exactly as though you are connected to the grid, or in this case, it might even be that you have your own power unit that is able to run at full reliability all year, delivering that reliability of power. That could be game-changing. And particularly if the Australian resources sector isn't positioning to take advantage of that technology, I think we can expect to see resources sectors in other parts of the world, like Canada, for example, moving on that ahead of us. That might press the issue a little harder.
One of the issues, I suppose, is particularly important for industry, but also for ordinary taxpayers, is cost of energy. And so what we see across Australia is a really significant divide between those on the eastern states as part of the grid and those in Western Australia on the back of essentially an LNG pipeline. Our members are essentially paying twice as much in the eastern states. That's a real a barrier to investment and to new projects taking place in the states. Does renewable technologies being brought into that space, does that mean cost increases? Can it be done cost neutrally? Or are the real cost challenges we're seeing over there a consequence of the management of the grid?
So it's really important to think in terms of the totality of the system. So it can be easy to think that, say, a renewable power solution is able to bring power at a certain price, and if that price is low, then that would lend itself to lowering the wholesale price of a system that's in place. However, if in bringing that solution into the system, it displaces other providers who are holding up that system in vital ways, what fills in those spaces might actually tend to put the pressure on the price back up again. That's what I mean about the transition so far having been pretty messy. This first sort of 10 or 15 years of energy transition hasn't brought with it a lot of systematic thinking about how we're going to get this power system to run and operate. I thought it was very interesting this morning to have the Queensland government spokesman talk about wanting to use more renewables in Queensland and say quite pointedly, we've actually got enough solar coming on board. We really need more wind. There's going to be a point where just adding more solar in a sunny spot like Queensland isn't going to help anymore because they've flooded that part of the day with power. More power at that part of the day won't help. You have to think in a systems approach. So we're going to need more balancing there, and that's when what might appear at first glance to be a lower cost option, the true costs are revealed a little further down the track when you need to keep the system reliable as you raise those penetrations.
So your message really would be that although we're actually seeing a transition happening now, we've got new technologies arriving in the market, we're still going to need an energy mix, and that leaves a place for a wider range of commodities?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the further we go down this road, the more we're going to feel those system-based pressures. It's an underappreciated miracle, just the marvel of the grid, okay? The engineering marvel that is a functioning electrical grid that holds up an industrialised nation. And we're in the process of transitioning and displacing lots of things in and out of that. I think we're going to find that challenge is harder than we first appreciated. And we're going to be able to achieve it more cost effectively, provided we're more inclusive of all the technologies that are available to us. I think it's really important to use all technologies according to their advantages, managing their disadvantages appropriately, and not push any single technology too far, but bring them all together in an optimised blend. If we're more inclusive, we're going to get a better result. That's relatively common sense. Now, in some certain mining situations, there might be something appealing about being able to take a bit more control of that. Having a dedicated power supply to say, well, we can understand what our cost of power will be for this mining operation, to have that autonomy to de-risk that. And that's an option that might come up in the future on the basis of having more technologies available to us.
Okay. Fantastic. Looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, looking forward as well. Thanks
very much.
Cheers, mate.